I'm standing by the window, the cold glass pressing against my cheek, and outside, the streetlights blur through the rain like tears I can't shed. It's Christmas Eve, and Ethan and Lily sit quietly on the couch, their small faces hopeful, eyes straining for a shadow that won't come. Daniel promised he'd be here by 7. It's past midnight now. 6 hours. They believed him. I wanted to believe him too, but I'm not naive. This isn't the first time he stood us up. I'm Morgan Watson, 29 years old, an elementary school teacher, a single mom, trying to keep everything together for my 2 kids, teaching by day, parenting by night, all while fighting a battle no one sees. The exhaustion weighs heavy, but I carry it because they need me to. No backup, no breaks, no one to lean on. In the silence, I pull out my phone, the screen lighting up the dark room, a quiet power I hold, access to Daniel's location through an app he doesn't know I control. It's not about spying, it's about truth, about knowing when he's lying to Ethan, to Lily, to me, a secret weapon in a war that's invisible to everyone but me. I glance over at the kids again, their innocence a fragile shield against the chaos Daniel leaves behind. And then there's Stephanie, his sister, who watches from the sidelines with a judgmental gaze, loyal to Daniel and merciless to me. She's always watching, always judging, a constant reminder that this fight isn't just with him, but with his family too. I'm weary, but I'm not broken. Not yet. The day Daniel first didn't show up still haunts me. It was a park near our old neighborhood, early in the divorce, when hope still flickered. Ethan and I sat on a bench, the autumn leaves swirling around us, waiting. He was late, then later called, voice strained, blaming traffic. I believed him, or tried to, until I saw his social media, photos of him laughing at a bar, drinks in hand, miles away from the excuse he gave. That was the first crack in the facade. I remember telling myself, maybe he really was stuck. Dads get busy. But that moment planted a seed of doubt, one that grew with every missed visit, every broken promise. Stephanie's voice cut through the noise soon after. "You're making it hard for Daniel," she said once, with a sneer so thinly veiled it stung. She sided with him from the start, turning family gatherings into battlegrounds. I was working 2 jobs, paying $450 a month in child support that Daniel rarely matched, buying school supplies with what little I had left. Yet all anyone seemed to see was me falling short. The weight of their judgment pressed down, eroding my confidence, isolating me. It wasn't just Daniel I was fighting. It was his entire family's version of the truth. Every month, I scrambled to stretch my paycheck. $200 isn't much when you're raising 2 kids alone. Rent, groceries, school fees, activities, they add up fast. Last month, I paid $1,200 just for childcare, taking extra shifts whenever I could, often working late into the night after putting Ethan and Lily to bed. The house is quiet then, but my mind races. Daniel's child support payments are just as inconsistent as ever. $200 here, nothing there, while he posts photos from concerts and weekend trips. It's infuriating. My brother James tries to help where he can, watching the kids for a few hours, but even his support is limited. Stephanie's surveillance makes sure every mistake I make is reported back to Daniel, a constant pressure that never lets up. Yet I have my secret edge. That app on my phone, quietly tracking Daniel's location, gives me a small measure of power in a sea of lies. When he claims he's unemployed, I know if he's really at a job interview or at a bar. It's a tool of truth in a battlefield of deception. But even with this, I'm exhausted, physically and emotionally. The fight isn't just about money or custody. It's about protecting Ethan and Lily from the growing storm around them. The park was supposed to be neutral ground, but the custody exchange that afternoon felt like a public trial. Neighbors and parents from school stood nearby, their eyes darting between Daniel and me. He arrived late, face flushed with irritation, voice sharp as he barked over minor custody details. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he yelled, loud enough for everyone to hear. I stood silent, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. Stephanie was there too, lurking close, her phone raised, filming every heated word. Later, Rumors spread. Whispers that I was too controlling, that I was the problem. Friends I once trusted looked at me differently. I told myself it was just a bad day, that he was stressed. But inside, a seed of doubt took root. Was I losing this battle not just in court, but in the eyes of everyone around me? The moment I dared to push back, the backlash came swift and brutal. Stephanie's texts to Daniel weren't just updates. They were poison, twisting every mundane detail into a weapon against me. Morgan was yelling at Ethan again. Out of control, she'd type. Left Lily alone in the kitchen. You need to see this. I knew she exaggerated, but her words seeped into Daniel's ears, feeding his indifference. At school, I noticed the subtle shifts. The way teachers averted their eyes when I passed. The sideways glances from parents whispering in clusters. Invitations to parent-teacher nights stopped arriving. My phone stopped buzzing with friendly texts. The isolation tightened like a noose. I confronted Stephanie once, in the grocery store aisle, my voice barely above a whisper. Why are you doing this? She just smirked, eyes cold. I'm protecting my family, she said, the words like ice shards. You're the one tearing it apart. That denial stung worse than any truth. Meanwhile, Daniel's phone calls to the kids dwindled. Child support payments slowed to a trickle. I felt the walls closing in, but I clenched my jaw and vowed not to retreat. This was war, and I was the only soldier on my side. With the pressure mounting, I tried to find a sliver of peace. I agreed to mediation, hoping, foolishly maybe, that we could set aside the bitterness for Ethan and Lily's sake. The room was sterile, the mediator's face unreadable as I laid out my case. Bank statements showing Daniel's missed child support, screenshots of his lavish social media posts, a detailed log of missed visitations. I spoke calmly, my voice steady even as my heart pounded. Stephanie sat beside Daniel, eyes sharp, interrupting with accusations that I was alienating him, painting me as the villain. The mediator nodded sympathetically toward Daniel's financial struggles, as if that excused everything. I left that room crushed, the weight of the system's bias pressing down. It wasn't about what was true. It was about who performed victimhood better. My hope for resolution shattered in that cold conference room, replaced by a deep, aching weariness. But I still had to fight, because my children depended on me. The second humiliation cut deeper than before. Ethan's school recital was supposed to be a moment of joy, a brief escape from the chaos. He was so proud, whispering backstage, "Mom, Dad said he'd be here." I forced a smile, holding his trembling hand, but inside I was bracing for disappointment. Daniel didn't show. The empty seat beside us screamed louder than any words. Then Stephanie appeared, loud and venomous, accusing me of making excuses for Daniel's absence in front of parents and teachers. A few whispered as videos of the confrontation spread online, turning me into a caricature, a drama queen, unstable, unfit. The blows didn't stop there. A small tutoring contract I'd relied on slipped away, the client citing doubts about my stability. Ethan's smile faded, replaced by confusion and hurt, and I felt the weight of his pain settle inside me. But amidst the humiliation, my resolve hardened. I wasn't just fighting for respect. I was fighting for their future. Desperation clawed at me, so I reached out to Daniel one last time. My texts were simple, practical. Ethan's outgrown his shoes. Lily needs her asthma meds refilled. Please send $500 this week. I offered to talk, to negotiate visitation calmly. His reply was cold and dismissive. Can't right now. Busy. Then silence. No calls. No messages. A family friend warned me. He's not worth the stress. I wanted to believe Daniel still cared, that he wasn't choosing this path. But when I spoke to James, my brother caught between us, I voiced the bitter truth. He's choosing this. Choosing us to suffer. The line had been crossed, and the fragile hope I'd clung to was gone. The fight wasn't just legal or financial anymore. It was a battle for my children's lives, and I was standing alone, fierce but exhausted, ready to face whatever came next. The silence from Daniel's family was deafening. I reached out to James again and again, my messages growing more desperate, my voice cracking over the phone when I finally got through. But even James's sympathy had thinned to polite distance. Stephanie's rumors had done their work. She painted me as unstable, too volatile to be trusted with Ethan and Lily. James wavered, caught in the middle as if my exhaustion was a choice, not the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. Every plea for support bounced off walls built by lies and resentment. Stephanie's poisonous whispers had spread through the small circles I once thought were safe. Neighbors, teachers, even a few of my closest friends started to pull away as if my battle was contagious. I could feel my world shrinking, the network I'd relied on unraveling stitch by stitch. The financial strain was suffocating. The child support Daniel owed had piled up to nearly $3,000, each unpaid dollar a brick in the wall closing in around us. Bills piled on the kitchen table, unopened envelopes casting shadows over my attempts to breathe. I balanced teaching, parenting, and overtime shifts at the after-school program, but it never felt like enough. The weight wasn't just money, it was the silent ache of knowing Daniel flaunted his new life. The vacations, the dinners, the laughter I never heard here. Ethan started having nightmares, waking up screaming about a shadow chasing him, something I couldn't shield him from no matter how fiercely I fought. Lily, once a chatterbox, retreated into silence, clutching her stuffed bunny like a lifeline. Their innocence was cracking, and it tore at me like no legal battle ever could. I questioned myself more than ever. Was I strong enough? Was I failing them by shouldering this alone? The exhaustion blurred the edges of my resolve. Some nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling swallowed by the relentless tide of disappointments. No backup, no breaks, just a mother doing everything alone, scraping together a life for two small souls who depended on her. The loneliness was a constant, heavy companion, but somewhere deep inside, beneath the endless weariness, a spark flickered. It was faint, fragile, but it was there, a defiance that whispered, "Keep fighting. For Ethan, for Lily, for the mother they needed me to be." I clenched my fists in the dark, promising myself I wouldn't let this silence be the end. Christmas Day arrived with a cruel weight. Ethan and Lily sat by the front window, their small faces pressed to the glass, eyes wide with hopeful anticipation. Daniel was supposed to come by noon, maybe just for a little while, but the hours passed with no sign. 6 long hours of waiting, questions whispered between them and me. "Is Daddy coming?" I told them yes, over and over, even as my heart broke a little more with every passing minute. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Sorry, stuck in traffic." I stared at the screen, my throat tight, and then I opened the app. His location blinked on my screen, 2 miles away, at a restaurant. Not alone, but with someone else. A woman, his new girlfriend. The timestamp was clear, the betrayal brutal and undeniable. I screenshot the location and sent it straight to my lawyer, my hands trembling. Ethan's face turned from hopeful to heartbroken, Lily's eyes filling with tears she didn't understand. Across the street, neighbors whispered, some offering quiet condolences after seeing the kids wait alone. The moment something inside me shattered and then hardened. The illusion I'd clung to, that Daniel might change, that he cared enough, crumbled into dust. I told myself firmly, no more lies, no more waiting. The cold clarity cut through the pain. This wasn't just a man failing his children. It was a battle for their future, and I was done hoping for mercy. I would fight with everything I had. My children deserved truth, not empty promises. That night, alone in the quiet of my small living room, I let the flood of emotions come crashing down. Every betrayal replayed in my mind. Daniel's missed payments, the broken promises, Stephanie's venomous attacks that chipped away at my credibility and my spirit. I did everything and got nothing, I whispered to the shadows. But the sadness soon morphed into a fierce, burning anger. I thought of how I had shielded Ethan and Lily from the worst of it, how they still believed in their father despite the wounds. That belief was a fragile thread I vowed to sever gently but firmly. I won't let him hurt them anymore, I promised myself, feeling the pain sharpen into resolve. This was no longer about surviving day to day. This was war. I was no victim. I was a warrior, and I would fight until my voice, my truth, was heard. The dawn brought a new kind of clarity. I called James, my brother, the one person I could still reach through the fog of lies. I shared the screenshots, the evidence that could no longer be ignored. We talked quietly, but with purpose, laying out a plan to petition for custody modification. I explained how I would protect the kids emotionally, how honesty now meant shielding them from further betrayal. James hesitated, old family loyalties tangled in his mind, but he agreed to testify if needed, to stand with us against the storm. I told him about monitoring Daniel's movements, the quiet vigilance that gave me power in a world that tried to silence me. For the first time in a long time, the chaos felt like a battlefield I could navigate with strategy, not just desperation. The plan was clear: expose the lies, dismantle Stephanie's web of deceit, and secure a stable, safe future for Ethan and Lily. It wouldn't be easy. The courtrooms would be cold, the battles long, and the nights still lonely. But for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't known for a while: control. A fierce, simmering control. I was no longer just surviving. I was ready to fight back, and I would win, not for myself, but for the two small faces that looked to me with trust and love. The war was just beginning, and I was ready. I sat at the kitchen table, the soft glow of my laptop screen illuminating stacks of papers, bank statements, and printouts of Daniel's social media posts. The more I pieced together, the clearer the map of his dependencies became. Daniel's whole existence seemed anchored to Stephanie. The way she fed him information, shaped his narrative, and, more importantly, kept him sheltered from the consequences of his actions. She was his eyes and ears, the firewall between him and the truth. Meanwhile, his employer appeared as uninvolved as ever, lax oversight letting him skate on flimsy excuses for missed work. His obsession with social media was another weak point. Every lavish photo he posted was a loud, careless admission of his lies about financial hardship. I reached out to a family lawyer who specialized in custody and child support battles, someone who understood the grind of these cases all too well. Our conversations were clinical but hopeful, collecting bank records, piecing together Daniel's paycheck history, cross-referencing location data from the app on my phone. I compiled testimonies from neighbors who often heard Daniel's angry outbursts during his rare visits, and friends who had witnessed Stephanie's relentless monitoring of my social media, her constant reports to Daniel. That surveillance, once a source of dread, now felt like an unexpected advantage. I realized Stephanie's obsessive checking wasn't just harassment, it was a leash she held, and if I learned to tug the right way, it could unravel their whole scheme. The thought sent a spark of excitement deep into my chest. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting, I was strategizing. I could use their own paranoia against them, turning their surveillance into a weapon of exposure. I pictured Stephanie refreshing my profiles, waiting for a slip, unaware that behind her back, I was building an arsenal of proof, ready to shatter the false image they'd crafted. Daniel's reliance on this fragile network was a vulnerability I could exploit. The weight of exhaustion didn't disappear, but a fierce clarity settled in. I wasn't alone in this fight. I had allies in the law, and I had the power of truth on my side. Still, the knowledge was heavy. Every detail I uncovered was a reminder of how deeply tangled they were in trying to control me, and through me, the kids. But I refused to let their manipulations define our future. This was the war I'd chosen, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. The days that followed were a quiet storm of preparation. I spent hours scanning and organizing documents, creating a secure digital folder for my lawyer, making sure every piece of evidence was accounted for and accessible. Passwords to shared accounts were changed, email, school portals, even the children's medical records, to cut off any chance Daniel had to spy or sabotage. I felt the weight of every locked door, every encrypted file, as a small victory in this lonely battle. With Ethan and Lily, I carefully maintained a delicate balance. I kept my tone calm and steady, shielding them from the undercurrents of tension that roiled beneath our daily routines. When Ethan asked about his dad, I answered honestly but gently. Sometimes dads make mistakes, but we have each other. Lily, with her innocent questions and bright laughter, was a constant reminder why this fight mattered. Their small moments of joy fueled me, even as exhaustion pressed down like a lead weight on my shoulders. I played the part of the tired, compliant mother when we were in public, hiding the fire that burned beneath. Stephanie's constant surveillance was still there, though I imagined her frustration growing with my silence. She probably saw my quiet acceptance as weakness, but behind closed doors, I was anything but. I met with my lawyer in hushed, purposeful sessions, discussing next steps, legal maneuvers, and the best ways to present the evidence without letting Daniel or Stephanie catch wind. Every conversation was a thread being pulled, unraveling the control they thought they held. I was patient, waiting for the moment when all this preparation would explode into action. The loneliness was suffocating sometimes. No one saw the hours I spent on the phone, the late nights poring over financial records, the endless mental calculations to keep the kids fed, clothed, and emotionally whole. But I clung to the silence, knowing that once the storm broke, I needed to be ready. Stephanie's watchful eyes blinded her to the shift beneath her feet. The tables were turning, and I was the one holding the map. Then, out of nowhere, a message landed in my inbox, a private message from a woman named Rachel. My heart pounded as I read her words. Rachel was Daniel's new wife, but her message wasn't what I expected. She was trapped in a nightmare of abuse and manipulation, just like I had been. Her confession was raw, urgent, detailed accounts of Daniel's controlling behavior, the lies, the threats, all echoing the patterns I'd endured. She was scared, terrified for her safety, but she trusted me enough to reach out. I felt a surge of electricity ripple through me. This was the confirmation I needed. The web of Daniel's deceit extended far beyond my family, touching lives I hadn't imagined. Rachel's honesty was a weapon, a key to unlocking the full truth, and an unexpected alliance that could finally expose him for what he was. The weight of isolation I'd carried shifted, replaced by a fierce hope that together we might break this cycle. We carefully planned a discreet meeting, exchanging whispered warnings and coded messages. The urgency was tangible. Rachel's life depended on secrecy, and my children's future depended on her courage. Our combined knowledge was a force that could topple Daniel's carefully constructed facade. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. This new alliance electrified me, sharpening my resolve to end this nightmare. For my kids, for Rachel, for every lie Daniel thought he could bury. The execution began quietly but decisively. My lawyer filed for custody modification and enforcement of child support, attaching the screenshots, bank statements, and Rachel's heartbreaking statements. I blocked Daniel on every social media platform, changed emergency contacts, and tightened the circle around my children. Stephanie noticed immediately. The shift in my demeanor, the silence where there had been desperation, the sudden legal paperwork flooding their inboxes. She sensed a storm brewing but couldn't yet see the force behind it. Daniel's response was confusion and retreat. Payments stopped altogether, and he missed scheduled visits without explanation. I watched the first legal notices land in his mailbox, each one a crack in the armor he'd so carefully worn. The consequences of his negligence began to ripple through their fragile control. He was scrambling, but still blind to the full extent of what was coming. Stephanie's reports grew frantic, but her venomous updates no longer held the power they once did. I kept my face calm in front of Ethan and Lily, though inside I was a tempest of hope and fear. The first moves were made, and now the battle lines were drawn more clearly than ever. Daniel was stumbling, caught off guard, but he didn't yet understand the depth of the fight I'd prepared. I watched carefully, waiting for the moment when the first cracks would become a full collapse. Until then, I kept fighting silently, fiercely, for my children, for our future, for the truth that would set us free. The parking lot was unusually quiet when I arrived early, clutching my phone like a shield. The cold bit through my jacket, but I barely noticed. My heart hammered, not with fear, but with resolve. It was time. The past months of silent surveillance, gathering evidence, and quiet suffering had led to this moment. I found a spot close to the agreed meeting point and sat, fingers trembling only slightly, ready to capture every second. Daniel would come late, as usual, irritable and careless, and I would be ready. When he finally pulled in, 15 minutes past our arranged time, His face was a storm of annoyance, the exasperated sighs, the scowl directed at me, the sneering words thrown like daggers. Neighbors began to take notice. "You're always late," I said calmly, voice steady despite the creeping heat of anger. "Always making excuses." Daniel spat back insults, trying to belittle me in front of the watching eyes, but I held my ground. Then I raised my phone, fingers steady, and pressed play. The screen lit up with dozens of text messages where he promised payments he never made, screenshots of his social media tagging locations at expensive restaurants and bars, while claiming poverty in his texts to me. The Find My Friends app tracked his every move, and the time-stamped evidence was irrefutable. I saw the color drain from Daniel's face, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Stephanie, lurking nearby, pushed forward to intervene, but a neighbor stepped in asking pointedly, "Who are you? And why are you spying on this family drama? This isn't your fight." The shift in power was palpable. For once, it wasn't me who was on the defensive. I spoke clearly, my voice cutting through the tension. "No more lies, no more games. I'm done protecting your image at the expense of my children's well-being." The crowd, small as it was, murmured in agreement. Daniel's furious glare turned into stunned silence. This wasn't the fearful, controlling man I'd known behind closed doors. He was exposed, powerless. I lowered my phone, heart pounding with a fierce pride. This was my champagne moment. The moment the truth stood tall, and I reclaimed control over a fractured family's future. Word spread fast, as it always does with moments like this. The video I recorded at the exchange circulated quietly, but widely among mutual friends and family. Daniel, once so confident and dismissive, was suddenly the subject of whispered conversations and pointed looks. His frantic calls started the very next day, pleading, apologizing, promising change. But I was no longer the woman who would accept empty words. I let the calls go unanswered, the messages unread. Each new attempt felt weaker, more desperate. Stephanie's efforts to spin the narrative only made her look more unhinged. Her frantic text storms, claiming I was unstable or vindictive, fell flat against the concrete evidence I held. Even her closest allies began to question her loyalty when she couldn't produce proof to back her stories. Daniel's social standing took a hit at work, too. I heard from a colleague that his supervisor had started asking tough questions. The facade they'd built crumbled brick by brick, and I watched silently, steady as a mountain, as their world fell apart. Despite the chaos, I remained calm, the quiet eye in a storm. My lawyer advised me to avoid contact, and I trusted that wisdom. Every attempt from Daniel to reach me only strengthened my resolve. I was protecting not just myself, but the fragile innocence of Ethan and Lily. They deserved a mother who was fierce, unbreakable, and clear-eyed. I wasn't going to let their father's failures or Stephanie's poison touch them any longer. The truth was my fortress, and I was standing guard. Stephanie, sensing her grip slipping, tried to pull strings behind the scenes. But her credibility was shot, and her venomous words echoed hollowly in empty rooms. She was isolated, and I could feel it. The tension was no longer mine alone to bear. Their desperation filled the spaces I once occupied, their attempts to regain control falling flat. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was winning, and my children were finally safe from the shadows of their father's lies. Stephanie's final attempts to manipulate me grew more frantic and reckless. She orchestrated whispered attacks at my workplace, anonymous emails hinting at instability, subtle threats lurking in the background. I heard rumors of her trying to intimidate Rachel, Daniel's soon-to-be ex, but none of it stuck. I documented every incident meticulously, filing reports with my lawyer and the authorities. Her efforts only hardened my resolve. I wasn't a victim to be frightened into silence. I was a warrior mother, fighting for my family's right to peace. Daniel's love bombing, the sudden promises to fix everything, fell on deaf ears. I had heard it all before, empty words wrapped in desperation. I let him talk, recorded the conversations when possible, and shared the evidence with my lawyer. My brother James, who had been hesitant at first, finally publicly sided with me, lending a voice that shattered the illusion of family unity Daniel and Stephanie had tried to maintain. Their isolation deepened, and with every failed manipulation, my grip on our future strengthened. The nights were still long, the exhaustion still there, but my spirit was unshakable. I held my children close, their safety my North Star. No threat, no lie, no desperate manipulation could break the shield we'd built. I was ready for whatever came next because I wasn't alone anymore. I had truth, law, and love, and that was an unbreakable alliance. Months later, the weight I'd carried alone had lightened. Ethan and Lily played in the sunlight filtering through our cozy living room, their laughter a balm to my weary soul. The custody order now favored me, with Daniel's visits supervised and strictly monitored. Rachel, safely away from Daniel's reach, remained a trusted ally and friend. The battles in court had been grueling, but they had forged a new reality, one where my children's well-being came first. Sitting quietly at the kitchen table after tucking them in, I reflected on how far we'd come. The hardest battles don't just change your life, they reshape your children's future. Ethan's small arms wrapped around me, his voice soft and sure. "Thanks, Mom, for never giving up." Tears blurred my vision, but I smiled through them. I had reclaimed peace, set firm boundaries, and transformed pain into strength. Alone on this path, I had found freedom, not the kind that comes with ease, but the kind born from fierce love and unyielding courage. Our future was no longer uncertain. It was a promise I intended to keep. For Ethan, for Lily, for the mother I had become. The war was over, but the peace we had earned was just beginning, and together we would walk forward, strong and unafraid, into the hope of a new tomorrow.